All right, greetings everybody. My name is Todd Harden from Plastic Oceans International. I want to welcome everybody that's logging on to the first of our panel discussions for our Trees and Seas Festival. This is called The Circular Economy as a Strategy for Conservation, basically how nature's model is the key to saving it. Trees and Seas, what is it? It's a global event taking place in over 30 locations around the world. We've got over 100,000 trees that we're going to be planting. We have over 100 beach cleanups, forest cleanups. We have workshops. We have these panel discussions, film screenings, and a lot going on. So if you haven't checked it out, please go to plasticoceans.org where you'll find all the information you need, including the entire series of panel discussions that we have available throughout the week, like this one, all made absolutely available to you free of charge. And we have to thank Montez Wines for that, our presenting sponsor for the festival, who really came on board to provide the kind of funding that makes all this possible for this global event. So we do thank them immensely. We want to remind you that there are 5 attendees who will be randomly selected to win a hardcover edition of our book, Living Without Plastic. It's published by Andersen books. And we look forward to providing those winners at the end of the panel. So stay tuned for that, and we'll show the names towards the end of that. We do want to remind you that the Q&A function in your Zoom chat, feel free to drop questions in there. At the conclusion of the panel discussion, we will go to you, the audience, to participate and also try to address some of your questions that you have. You know, with that, I do want to take a look at our panel discussion in a little bit more detail. We're going to be basically discussing the basics of the circular economy, how it can fix the flaws and inefficiencies of our current production system, and in the end, helps to protect the environment. Quick introduction of our panelists. We have Julie Andersen joining us. Julie is the CEO of Plastic Oceans International and a lifelong public health advocate focused on the communication of science and disruption of societal barriers to protect human health and the environment from the negative effects of industrial development. Beatriz is the founder of Exchange for Change Brasil. She assists organizations to rethink their business models, redesign products and processes, and gain competitive advantage to the circular economy mindset and strategies. Our third panelist is Samsurin Welch, who is the co-founder of Hive Market Limited, a B2B marketplace for the circular economy, helping companies turn waste into wealth by finding new opportunities for wasted materials. He's also a researcher at Cambridge University. And finally, our esteemed moderator, Mr. Mark Minneboo. Mark is not only one of the world's leading experts on circular principles, he also serves as the regional director for Latin America for us at Plastic Oceans, in addition to leading our team in Chile, where Mark has really been at the foremost of pushing Chile into a plastics pact, as well as the recent move to ban single-use plastic in their country. So with that, enough from me as introductions. Mark, I will turn it over to you and the panelists, and I'm looking forward to enjoying this engaging discussion.
Thank you very much, Todd. Thank you, all the panelists, for being here today with us to talk more about the circular economy. And also, thank you already, the 113 people from all around the world who are interested in this very interesting topic, the circular economy. I'm very happy about this. And of course, also to do a little very short introduction about the circular economy. Some of you of the people here connected today are more familiar with the circular economy than others, and we, the panelists, and me, the moderator, who work with the circular economy on a day-to-day basis, sometimes we tend to forget that the circular economy for some people is something we use every hour, every minute of the day, and for other people it's still something, it's more of a trendy word, circular economy, that you can read in a newspaper, or many companies are using it. But we sometimes forget that the circular economy, although it's easy to understand maybe at the beginning, it has very many different details that we have to take into consideration for it to really be circular and be a system that really works. So without talking too much, me being the moderator, I would like to proceed with the question to our esteemed panelists. And in this case, well, before I go to the panelists, I must say that we're going to do polls today as well. with the public. So we also want to invite you that we're going to be projecting a question in the screen, which we ask you to respond as quickly as possible, so we can also use this as an input for our discussion. So before I go with the first question, I would like to present the first poll here on screen that you can all answer. And the question here is, do you know what is the circular economy? And there's only two options, yes or no. And let's see what the people are saying, yes or no. Please submit your answer. Is everybody seeing the poll on the screen? Here we go. There we have a first answer. 71% says yes, 29% says no. I think these are very good percentages for our first question that I'm going to ask to Samsurin. The first question, Samsurin, which I would really like you to help us answer, is what is the circular economy and why does it matter?
Thank you, Mark. That's a great question. And really nice to see the results of the poll. I think we have a very informed audience over here around the circular economy, which is a really great basis to have a discussion today. What is a circular economy? You know, it's a topic that's become very, very interesting and very, very hot in the past recent year or so. We teach a course here at the University of Cambridge, which is an online program, which Julie actually took as well. In the last group, I'll just mention some numbers. We had 600 over almost 700 participants join that course. So this is how interested the community, the society has become about circularity. But what is circular economy? Okay, so circular economy, it's a solution to a problem. The problem is overconsumption of finite resources, right? So we live in a world today, I think our population is about 7.5 billion today. It's going up to 8 billion people today. And we need resources, but the way we've been consuming resources today is not sustainable. Now, resource consumption itself is not bad, right? We need resources to survive, to grow, to prosper. The problem is the way we've been consuming it. The model of consumption production today is not sustainable for the long term. So let me just quickly say, I'll tell you three things about the circular economy to explain just a basis for our discussion what it is. The first thing is the C part, the circular part. So what is the circular and the circular economy? Well, the best way to understand the circular part is to understand what it is not. And the circular economy is the opposite of what we're doing today, which is the linear economy. The linear economy is what we sometimes call the take, make, and waste cycle. So the way we produce and consume things today is we take natural resources, natural capital. So it's natural agriculture, it's soil, it's water, and so on. We take that, we make stuff, we make products, we make services, we use them. So actually it should be four. We use these things as products and services. And then when we're done with them, we turn them into waste. We throw them away. They go to landfill, they go into incineration, and so on and so forth in a way that's very taxing on our environment. So the take, make, use, and waste, we like three, but it's actually four. The take, make, use, and waste economy has been quite problematic for us in the long term. Just an example, some numbers, you know, in terms of plastics, we talk about plastics. We produce 300 million tons of plastics per year, which is about the equal size of the human population, which is crazy in terms of plastic waste. Okay, so what is the circular economy? The circular economy is turning that around. It's actually inspired by nature. And there are many models around the circular economy, but there are three key principles behind the circular economy. Number one, we want to take these materials that we use, but keep them in use as much as possible in the economy. So keep materials in use as much as possible, extract the most value out of these resources that we're using to produce things, products, and services. That's the first part. The second part is we want to design out waste. So there shouldn't be, in an ideal case, there should be zero waste in our economy. Any waste is actually technically a resource. We need to reframe the thinking of waste into a resource. And that's one of the things that we're actually trying to do with Hive Market, which Todd mentioned earlier. And the third aspect is the way we produce, the way we consume things should be in a regenerative manner. So we should be consuming and producing things in a way that regenerates natural capital so that we create this continuing cycle of resources so we don't run out of resources for society. So that's the circular aspect. I'll quickly mention the economy aspect. So in the circular economy, there's the circular and there's the economy. The economy aspect of the circular economy tells us that circularity is not just a thing you do on the side. So it's not just a CSR thing, which is very important, but circularity itself is not just a corporate social responsibility or a thing we do on the side, but it is a fundamental redesigning and rethinking of how we produce and consume. So for companies, it's a redesigning of business models around these principles that I just mentioned. And that actually can create a great opportunity for companies. It is also a macroeconomic opportunity as well. So countries such as the EU and China, for example, are increasingly incorporating circularity into their economic policies because they see this as an economic opportunity for growth in the long term. So circularity is about the economy. And the last thing I'll say, which I know we're going to discuss further, is circularity is not just about recycling, at least not in the way that we're doing it today. So recycling itself is not going to help us solve our problems. We need to rethink the entire model. And we're going to talk more about that in a little bit, but I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you very much, Samsurin. Just to add something a bit more to what you're already telling. So in this new economic model, as you're saying, is it the same as being more sustainable? Like, you know, shifting for the circular economy, is it just the same as we have to just be more sustainable, or it's not exactly the same?
So I will say something about that, and then I'll let everyone else jump in as well. So to me, the way I see it, sustainability is the overall goal that we want to live. We want to live sustainably. And the definition that we like to use about sustainability is that we should be able to live and consume and produce in a way that does not tax the feasibility and viability of the future. So we shouldn't be taking away resources from the future just so we can prosper and survive today. So we want to think about how we produce and consume in this world today in a way that preserves the future and preserves our planet and preserves society. The circular economy is a mechanism for us to think about how we can live, produce, and consume in a sustainable way. And those principles of designing our waste, regeneration, keeping materials in use, extracting the most value, these are mechanisms in which we can think about living sustainably.
Thank you very much, Samsurin. So for our next question, I would like to turn to Julie Andersen. So Julie, in all your time in Plastic Oceans, introducing the circular economy is being part of, you know, the story we tell, the story that, you know, what you were asking people is like, hey, we should maybe go there to the circular economy. Implementing the circular economy has become more and more part of your mission as an organization, not just ocean conservation and keeping plastic away from the ocean. So why did you choose to incorporate the circular economy into the mission from Plastic Oceans?
Thank you, Mark. I think that's a great question. I think, you know, going off what Samsurin said about sustainability and about regeneration, about the environment, it's important that we maintain our lifestyles as humans, but we also consider the environment. And part of that is, part of maintaining our lifestyle is human impact. And one of those, you know, that we have energy consumption that is impacting climate change, but right next to it is plastic pollution. Plastic is something that is a human invented material that has a great impact on the environment. And it has loads, and we can talk endlessly about all of its benefits, but what we had never considered in its linear model, when the take, make, use, and then throw away, is that we produce over 300 million tons of plastic with no consideration of the end of life of that plastic, where most of that plastic just ends up in waste, which means it's in the environment. Maybe it's in a contained waste in a waste facility, but it is still not being taken care of. And to me, you know, with only less than 10% being recycled, and that's only an interesting statistic in that out of the over 300 million tons of plastic being produced, such a small fraction is actually being considered in some way of being reused in some way, which means we have a waste problem. And where circular economy comes into play, it just becomes a critical solution in how we can reduce waste, how we can take a lot of that product or end of life material, plastic material, come up with other ways to keep it in use. And ultimately, I think it is a way to achieve lowering our carbon emissions. If we are taking that waste, end of life plastic waste, and reusing it, finding alternative ways to reuse it, and not only are we not taking out natural resources, virgin natural resources to produce more, we're keeping it within the cycle. And that, I think there's a way to then basically kill two birds with one stone. We need, part of us organizing Trees and Seas Festival and bridging land and sea conservation is we need to stop seeing things in isolation. Why can't we solve the problem of plastic pollution and climate change? Why don't we start collaborating cross industries and start solving these problems holistically? And that's what circular economy means to me. And that's what nature is doing. Nature, a simplistic way is nature uses its resources, creates waste, but that waste is then utilized by other parts of the environment, by nature, to regenerate. And I think a simple example is an apple, and as we eat an apple, we eat it, we don't want the core, we throw it back in, throw it to the soil, the worms eat it, the bugs eat it, it returns back to soil, regenerates another apple tree. And that's what we can do as humans. It's never going to be as perfect as maybe an apple, but we can definitely reduce our waste and figure out ways to support innovation that regenerates.
So in a way, Julie, using the example of the apple, clearly we cannot do that with plastic, throw it on the floor, and hopefully then organisms take care of plastic. But thinking about the circular economy, we can make sure that there is a system in place that if I want to get rid of plastic or any other waste, there is a system that will take care of it.
Exactly. And I right now, maybe we can't throw plastic on the ground, but we are not limited. I mean, the fact that we even invented plastic, that did create the society that we have. It improved sanitation. It improved food security, safety. It improved the weight. It's easy to transport. It does reduce emissions when traveling and transporting of goods. So the fact that we can introduce these type of materials and these inventions, we do have the capacity to invent new materials that could be beneficial. And the idea of circular economy is that it is a way to bring back the environment into our economy. It is not a side, just like Samsurin said, it is not a side note. This is not something, we're a bunch of activists on the side and let's do something as a hobby. This is something that we need to incorporate and quantify and give value into our economy because we are dependent on the resources that the environment provides us.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Julie. If any of the other panelists feel that they want to complement what you're saying, please feel free, Beatriz or Samsurin. So let's try to have a conversation between the four of us. So even Samsurin, you want to complement that?
Yes. I wanted to pick up on Julie's point about innovation, and I completely agree. Like, it's amazing what humanity, the private sector, the public sector can actually achieve with innovation if we focus our efforts in the right way and focus our resources in the right way. And one example I'd like to use, just kind of using the sustainability theme a bit bigger, is how much development and progress has been made in the field of renewable energy. Solar, wind. I mean, if you look at the cost of new, they call it the levelized cost of energy in terms of solar installations and wind installations, the cost has fallen off the cliff, literally in the past 10 years. And that's because we focused on innovation. We've done public-private partnerships, those policy levers, regulation levers, there's private sector innovation, venture capital, and so on. And so there's so much capability and capacity to innovate and improve society if we focus on the right things. And that's what we need to achieve.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Samsurin. Beatriz, you turn on your microphone. You want to add something to that?
Wow, I have a lot of things to say.
Great.
Well, one point that I should add at this moment, when I was working with the plastic industry, one client told me that the plastic is the cure and the curse at the same time. So it depends where it stands, where it ends. So I love when Samsurin said that circular economy is not a side discussion. And when Julie says that we need to think full cycle, So my perspective is that we were all innocent about the waste that we are generating with a linear economy. So now we know, now we are aware of the impact and the result of the linear economy. So what do we have to do now? So we need to redesign the economy to avoid the problem and not trying to solve the waste and the pollution issue. So circular economy for me, it's about that. It's about redesign, it's about rethink. Being efficient is not enough anymore because we are just going to delay the use of our natural resources. So we need to think in a different way, produce in a different way, use materials in a different way. So I think I love when the theme of this conference, when Julie says that we bring the land and the sea to discuss, the solution all together, because there is no such a thing as marine litter. The litter is coming from the cities, is coming from us. So our aim now is to avoid this waste generation, and the circular economy has this ability to design a new process that there's no such a thing as the end as waste, because everything is thought through right in the beginning to have a second cycle, to have a second value. So we always thought about only half a cycle. So we never thought about the full cycle. So we always developed products thinking on the use phase. So now we have to develop products and service thinking about the use phase and the after use phase. So this is the great view for me of the circular economy and the importance of this discussion.
Thank you, Beatriz, for complimenting it and adding some insights about the circular economy, which clearly is much more than just recycling or being more sustainable. So to continue a bit to a question for you, Beatriz, because you have been active in the circular economy for many years, both in Brazil and also globally. So talking about all these systems and the way we produce and the way we extract and the way we do things, clearly we're talking about changing the entire model, the way our society works. But do you think, because clearly this is something that's globally happening, each country has to find its own circular economy, its own way of doing things? Do you see differences, or we all have to go the same way? What is your view on that?
Well, I think there's definitely a global shift, and we all have to learn together about these new business models. The new action plan for circular economy that was launched in March 2020 clearly says that the European Union will only be successful in their transition, in their strategy, if this happens in a global level. So we are talking about the change entirely in the whole society, because the world is all interconnected. The value chains are all globalized. So we need to think in all different countries. But the point is, every country might have your own particularity, but the overall perception of changing the production, of changing the consumption, bringing new values, new attitudes, I think will apply for all societies in all countries, independently of the geographic location, of the cultural maturity, because people and industry and governments are the same in all countries. So we do need to adapt for a local reality, but I think the essence of the transition is that we can all learn together. Debates like that, it's essential for us to learn from each other what's happening in the UK, what's happening in Chile. And I'm sure by this knowledge exchange, this international knowledge exchange, we can accelerate the transition, because otherwise we'll just be transferring problems from one part to another. So the key point is to start this new business mindset that everything is interconnected. So we have to integrate the value chain. The solutions will not happen in one part of the value chain. And this holistic view, this ecosystem approach, I think is new for everybody. And it's good to share the challenges, the difficulties, because we can learn from each other a lot. And I think that's my view.
So in a way, what you're telling is what we're doing with this panel and all the other things during this week for trees and seas, where we're integrating these both ecosystems, the trees, the forests, oceans. We cannot see them as separate entities. Yeah. It's the same with the economy and the countries that, you know, where materials are being extracted, the other countries that maybe produce something, then sell it to other countries to consume it. So in a way, for instance, what is Brazil's role in this compared to the rest of the world? Because Brazil is a provider for resources, right? So Brazil is also, for instance, working already on a circular economy plan, a national plan, or how to integrate them. Is there something already going on?
Well, very recently, we were very grateful for UNIDO to sponsor a roadmap for Brazil, Chile, Argentina, and Mexico. So just last month, we had the results of this study, what would be a roadmap for circular economy. And the first important point that was highlighted is that we need a common vision. We need a country vision of what circular economy is about. And one thing that has been highlighted as being key for us, and I guess it will be for all Latin America, is the ecosystem value, as the richness of our region, you know, bioeconomy and the natural resources. And it's very interesting also when we see the EU action plan for circular economy, there is a targets there that say that we need to create a safe operating space. So international guidelines for natural resources management. So I think that's where Latin America and Africa and countries that are rich in natural resources have a really key role to play, because we can provide information about the activities on the ground and how we can facilitate, you know, this use of natural resources, because we have to find this equilibrium between the users and the suppliers, and especially on this global value chain. So I think there's an important role now for Latin America to get involved in this discussion.
Thank you, Beatriz. Any of the other panelists want to add something to that before we move on to the next question?
Go ahead, Samsurin.
I was just going to say, sorry, Julie. Did you want to go ahead, Julie?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to pick up on a point from Beatriz about learning from each other. And I really love that point. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from. We talk about the global north, the global south, developed economies, developing economies. We often think, developed economies needs to export their technology to developing economies to solve their problems. There's a lot that we can learn from emerging and developing economies, the global south, quote unquote, that we can take and bring back to developed economies to help us rethink about circularity, sustainability, closing the loop, regeneration, and so on. If you think about agriculture, if you talk to local communities in developing economies, emerging economies, I mean, they really live and breathe regenerative agriculture because they are really connected with the land, and they have to, because I need to think about feeding my family and my economic well-being for the next 5 to 10 years. And so if I need to think about regeneration in that sense, because it just affects my livelihood, there's so much we can learn and pick up from those sides of the world and bring over to this side. So there's a lot of cross-learning opportunities. I'm so impressed by what's happening in Latin America with Brazil, for example, and what's happening over there, and super excited to see what's going on.
Definitely. I'm just going to touch on the same thing. I picked up the same point is about the key to circular economy is this collaboration and learning from each other. And to the same point, similar to what Samsurin said, is that we learn from certain nations that actually are really part of the waste management process and separation and recycling much better, in a much better way than, well, anything I see here in the US, where it is much more of a disposable society, and there is no one wants to get into that waste management side. And the second point about collaboration, really recognizing the role that we all play, is that as much as I want to protect the environment, and it is easy for NGOs to get into that space of blaming of big corporations, of Dow Chemicals, Coca-Cola, whatever, they are critical in, we built them as far, we supported their growth and consuming their products, and they will play a critical role in making circular economy possible. And I think it is important to support, learn from them. I think, it wouldn't be surprising that Dow Chemicals, who has contributed a lot of problems, but at the same time, they do hold some valuable information and wealth to be able to put into research and development and innovation, into increasing advancement in recycling, chemical recycling, even waste in a lot of the energy companies that can find investment into renewable biofuels to help with a lot of our waste management issues. And also in the plastics industry, I can't emphasize enough that plastic is still extremely valuable in how it reduces emissions in its travel because of its lightweight durability. And I know I'm talking about plastic, but at the same time, there are other types of material waste like food waste. Food waste contributes almost 30% of our overall waste in our system. And they have shown that food waste is directly related to packaging. I buy sometimes, I buy the big bags of salad, and you buy them in these plastic bags, and I'm very optimistic I'm going to eat salad all week, but I don't get to it. And next thing you know, I'm throwing away I'm creating food waste, and I have plastic waste. So innovation and even that packaging, and where that comes down to, and I saw a question, we need to design out waste. And a lot of this cross collaboration is we're capable of designing creatively in order to solve multiple problems.
And if I can add to that, we just produced a guide for the plastic industry here in Brazil about how to design for recyclability and circularity. And the point that we added, that we saw in a lot of benchmark guides, is that we need to broaden the boundaries of the decision-making process when choosing materials and designing packaging. Because again, as I said before, the briefing was always for the use phase, and we never thought about the after use phase. So quite often we are very anxious, companies are very anxious to just change the material because of the market pressure. And they end up mixing the materials or creating a new packaging that could be heavier and not necessarily more recyclable. We have a global company, Unilever, bringing a new packaging to the market in Brazil to replace plastic, and they created a paper bottle, but this paper bottle has the plastic screw and the plastic top, and they are attached to the paper bottle. So have they asked the paper recycling industry if they are happy to accept this paper bottle that has a screw plastic and a bottle plastic? Has this design made recyclability better or not? So I think this systemic view, the designers have to work together with the recyclers to see if this solution is really better for closing the cycle. So I guess if it's all monomaterial and in plastic, if the consumer is well educated to put this material in the right place, the plastic can get this full circle. So I think the message that circular economy is telling us is that we need to think the use phase, and the after use phase. So the material can carry a new value if they are used again in a reverse circle. We don't want any materials in the environment. We don't want to generate waste. So this is what design out waste is about.
Thank you very much, Beatriz. I see that the chat is on fire, the questions and answers section. I mean, this is for the whole day. So many questions, and I would love to answer them all. And I am inviting everybody to keep sending questions anyway. We're trying to filter out some of them to present them to the panelists. But for now, we have another poll question that I would like to read for everybody also to answer, going back a bit to the basics of circular economy. We would like to ask everybody, the 160 participants that we have in our next poll question, which is of the R's, the following R's, the most underrated R in your opinion? When you think about circular economy, which one is the most underrated one? Reduce, reject, reuse, redesign, repair, recycle, or the last one, revalue? And that's a whole different question, a whole different discussion, but revalue is in general considered waste to energy. So let's see the results and see if our panelists can respond a bit to the results that are coming up very soon. Give you a few seconds more to think about your answer. All these R's are part of the circular economy. For everybody to understand, the circular economy, not just 3 R's or 5 R's, they could be 10 R's, 15 R's, but these are the main ones that are generally discussed nowadays. Okay, here come the results. Oh, that's very mixed. I don't know if one of the panelists want to respond to this one, but well, we got one that is clearly, well, not clearly, but the most underrated one, according to 21%, is repair, which is very interesting. And the second one that I see is redesign, and the third one is reduce. Anybody of the panelists would like to shed their light on these answers or give their own opinion or view on this one? Beatriz?
I think I do. You know what comes to my mind? The fact that these underrated R's have a direct connection with changing attitudes and habits. We think about product in isolation. So we have to reuse, I have to recycle. So it's very easy to connect once I have the product in my hands. But when we are telling the society that we need to change our attitudes, we need to change our behaviors. What about repairing a good? What about rejecting a packaging that is not necessary? What about reducing the use? I think this is, it's more difficult because it's about changing our convenience. You know, are we happy to change our habits to avoid the waste generation? When it comes to convenience, we practical things and packaging, you know, you know, so a little bit before we talked about blaming each other, blaming the industry, blaming, you know, but we have to take responsibility as well. So I thought it was very interesting, this poll.
Well, Samsurin wants to respond.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that point about consumer behavior, which I think is a super important point. I'll say something positive first. You know, I have the benefit of hanging out in a university environment. So I speak to a lot of younger generations, you know, the Gen Zs, the millennials, and I see the shift in how they think. I mean, they really believe in sustainability, living sustainable, living circular. They really believe that we need to change the way we do things. And that gives me a lot of hope, actually, that we actually can solve the problem, because all we have to do is tap on the energy of these younger generation. And here at the University of Cambridge, you know, there's a big move towards entrepreneurship and startups and so on. And there's so many super amazing startups that are coming out of Cambridge from research, from PhDs and from students and so on. I'll just name one just to give you an example. There's a company called Crast, which is actually founded by a friend of mine that came out of a PhD research. And what they do is, you know, talking about turning waste into resources. So they work with farmers. Right now, they're based out in India. So they work with farmers and they take agricultural residue, so crop residue. So if you imagine when you harvest your wheat and your barley and your so on and so forth, you take the grains, which you're going to use, where you typically have all this wasted, quote unquote, wasted product. So like the stalks, the leaves, and so on and so forth. Cellulosic residue, that's what they call it. Typically it gets tossed to landfill, typically it gets burned. It's basically a waste and a cost for the farmers. They take all this stuff, and through some technology they developed, they basically turn it into sustainable packaging materials, sustainable packaging, sustainable papers. And what it does is there's an environmental impact because you're not sending this stuff to waste, for example. There's an economic impact because now there's revenue for the farmers. So the farmers now, they used to have a waste product that they had to toss out. They now make money from it because, and because there's an economic incentive that changes the behavior, because the farmer now thinks, actually, this waste of mine actually is worth money. I'm going to make the effort to actually collect it and sort it and do it in a clean way so I can make the money off it. The municipalities love it because, it helps them achieve the net zero targets and so on. And so this is where I think reframing this idea of how we think about resources and products, reframing that waste is not waste, it actually has value, for example, but demonstrating that the value can flow back to the consumer. So like talk about fashion. So like reusability of fashion, secondhand fashion. If you can show consumers that actually your fashion has life after you use it and bring back some of that value back to the consumer, make money from your secondhand products, which is a big trend now, actually, especially among the younger generation. This can also help drive consumer behavior. People will change their behavior based on what affects them, right? So if something affects them directly, positively and negatively.
So in a way, you're talking about in a circular economy's chain reaction. Like when we get to the examples of revaluing waste, which in the end, waste is just a word we put for something that we think doesn't have any value, to create the resources in the end. Waste becomes a resource again. And then you get everybody more creative, involved in this new system, and people start changing their behavior, right?
Exactly. And I'll give you another example, if I may. This is not a new idea, right? It's become hot now because everyone's on top of it, which is great. But these concepts have been around for a long time. There's a company in the UK called British Sugar. British Sugar is this massive company that makes, well, you can tell they make sugar. And they figured out how to turn their waste products, their waste streams into revenue. So, out of one of their factories, they have 12 revenue streams that they created from waste, everything from yeast residue that goes into make animal feed, CO2 emissions from the ethanol production that goes into industrial refrigeration, revenue stream for them. Even the soil and the stones that they clean off the beets that come in, so they make sugar from beets. They turn that into topsoil and aggregate and sell that as a product. That's a revenue stream for them. And there's a mindset shift that they created, which is now let's look at our flows of materials. And every time you look at something and see this stuff is going to waste, how can I turn that into a resource that has an environmental impact, but also a cost economic impact for my business, cost and revenue? And just to give you a number, that factory, 3.5 million tons of input come into that factory every year. Only 100 tons go to waste in the end. And they're still trying to reduce that as much as possible as well. The rest of it is a revenue opportunity. So it's rethinking, reframing, looking at flows, innovation, of course, policy. We can talk about policy for like another hour or so about how that's going to help, but these things are definitely coming.
Great. I see Beatriz and Julia moving, like ready to get in there. So I would love to give the word to Julie first.
I just want to go back to the poll and seeing all those R's. It's nice to see how they basically they had equal weighting. And I think what this emphasizes is that there is no single solution. They are all solutions. And what is important to not, what we're trying to change, the mindset is not to believe in this linear way, in this isolation way where the solution starts with redesign, the solution starts with repair. A circle starts at any point you start, continues on the circle. And it comes down to your community, as an individual, your community, your city. We're all at different points on that circle, but that within a circular economy, you start where you can, and that will contribute to change. And that is what we're trying to do. And I know in that you can almost see where people are like, oh, it's redesign. And it's going back into that linear thinking. No, this is what the right answer is. And that's going to get us to the solution. It is a constantly evolving and adapting type of method or economy that we're trying to impose. And that's what nature does. We are constantly adapting to what nature provides, what's happening. As much as we want to control our environment and hold tight. We need to adapt with the environment because we depend on the environment. And that's what's important about that circular economy.
Yeah.
Thank you, Julie. Beatriz?
I really value that view, Julie, and I agree totally. We can start for any part of the circle, but the key message is that no company can do it alone. So you can start for any part, but you always have to integrate the value chain and do it together with your suppliers, thinking about the market, what experience your client wants, not just the product, thinking about, the service. And what Samsurin was telling us about British Sugar, it's about industrial symbiosis, right? It's about one company's waste can become another company's resource. And the UK is famous for the National Industrial Symbiosis Program, which I happily worked for 4 years. So I do know a lot about the case of British Sugar. And for the audience that is watching us today, the industrial symbiosis is one of the school of thought for the circular economy. So understanding this material flow, we can understand how one company's waste can become a value for another organization. But again, no organization can do it alone. So you need to bring them together because we will need to find a new economic equilibrium. When we look at waste as a raw material, we need a whole new set of cost system and logistics, infrastructure and supply that we need to calculate, and it will be completely different from the traditional model. So for me, another key message of the circular economy and how to promote these reverse cycles is about creating these new economic models, these new rules, these economic rules, in order to be able to demonstrate the real value of the waste as a raw material.
Thank you, Beatriz. We've been touching many topics in this last part. I think that the second poll question really triggered a very interesting conversation here in the group, but also in the chat and the questions and answers. I had some other questions prepared, but we have about 10 minutes left. So I'm trying to pick out some questions from the participants, which are also a bit connected to what we've been talking about, so we can continue this interesting conversation. I have one that came in the beginning of today's panel from Raymond Sweet, who asked, a few years ago, products lasted a long time. Do you see an appetite for governments to force businesses to stop planned obsolescence? I think first question is, anybody wants to answer the question, what is planned obsolescence? And following, do you see governments being interested in changing this, this concept of planned obsolescence?
I can take that. So planned obsolescence is this idea that, manufacturers design and produce products to go obsolete within a set number of times. So it's designed into the product itself. So if you can imagine, why is it that our phones sort of become really slow and fall apart after about a year, just in time when a new phone comes out? Well, that's planned obsolescence. That's the basic idea. It's an old idea. It goes back to the days of monopolies of light bulbs and so on, which we don't have time to get into, but that's the basic idea. The question is there an appetite for governments to force businesses to stop it? We are seeing much more of that today now. So in the EU, there's a campaign called the Right to Repair, which is actually part of a broader agenda called the Sustainable Product Design Initiative. The idea here is that to force companies to create regulations around design of products that you must avoid planned obsolescence and have principles of circularity in them. So for example, durability, used for a long time, design for recyclability and reuse and remanufacturing and so on and so forth, all the principles that we just spoke about. One example is in terms of e-waste, electronic equipment, for example, so phones and so on. So one of the proposals now is that you have to design these equipment to be repairable for at least 10 years. And so that's going to be a big impact. I know in the US, the Biden administration has just signed an executive order to try and make that happen as well. So these things are definitely coming. There's also stuff happening with batteries because of, we're going to electric vehicles. We're going to have an issue with all these batteries. So batteries also need to be designed in sort of a circular and sustainable way. So there is definitely an appetite that's coming to force these things to happen.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I know that one of the things that I've seen some of the questions and putting, will companies actually change without government policies and kind of putting the pressure on them to change. And here in California, where I'm based, they've been pushing for extended producer responsibility that actually extends to beyond just packaging, but to actually what the product is. And so by putting the burden of where the waste is going, this actually puts some pressure on the companies to take responsibility for their product and if your phone becomes outdated, to take that back, to recycle some of the metals and other components that are in it that can be reused. Otherwise, they do have to pay additional amounts of money for that, disposing of those products, and putting that extra tax or financial cost on those companies. You start to see companies innovate ways to reclaim that, or at least minimize the waste products that they're using, or packaging that they're using.
Well, I guess I could add, in my view, as the companies see their competitiveness becoming more and more heavy because of the number of industries supplying similar products, they will realize that that's not a clever strategy to produce for obsolescence, because the consumer have another choices. So they will go to another company. And I think a good example from the Netherlands, Julie mentioned about the cell phones. There's a startup that launched a company called the Fair Phone. So it's a mobile phone that is all modular. So if your screen breaks, you can yourself buy a new one, a change. You can add more memory. You can add more, gadgets. Isn't that a great experience for us? So if I could buy the Fair Phone, I would have my Fair Phone, but I cannot buy it yet in Brazil. But I guess the companies will soon realize that the competitive advantage is not more based on quality and price. It's about experience, it's about adding value, it's about connecting with your consumer. And I think this will drive the design for modularity, durability, and reduce the obsolescence in the production process.
Yeah, I totally agree, Beatriz. It's the same what happens with laptops nowadays and other mobile phones. Something breaks in your laptop, your battery dies, you bring it to a store and they say like, sorry, nowadays laptops cannot be fixed because everything is glued to the same system. So you have to break the whole system to fix it. And of course it's ridiculous, because next time I need to buy something like that, I will ask the question like, oh, can this computer be repaired? Can I change the battery? Can I change the hard drive? And if the answer is no, well, I probably will look for another company.
And in fact, this open up opportunities for providing IT technology and laptops as a service. So if it breaks, I will take it back and get a new one. So I was talking actually with a startup here in Brazil last week that they are leasing computers and they are growing and they are developing immensely in the last few years. So this is a good solution for the consumer. And nowadays with everything in the cloud, I don't even a computer to carry with me around. Perhaps I was telling them, what about I fly to a city where I'm going to work, and then in the airport, I will get a computer that I can use because all my files in the cloud. So I just use the laptop for a few meetings and to use, on the way. And then in my return, I will leave the computer there. So I don't need to carry a computer anymore. What about that?
So I love, if I can just jump in here, I love this conversation about competitive advantage because I'm in a business school, right? So I have to talk about competitive advantage. And this kind of links to some of the questions and the points I see in the chat about how do we convince our stakeholders, profitability, bottom line. This is how I see it, okay? So the world is shifting around us. There's a systemic shift that's happening in the world around us. There's a transformation that's happening in terms of the policy environment, the regulatory environment, in terms of consumer expectations. The younger generation are expecting more sustainability out of their brands. In terms of the funding environment, investors, funders, debt providers are increasingly looking at ESG and sustainability metrics in terms of providing capital. So the cost of capital is going to go up for unsustainable companies. In terms of technology is improving. So the analogy I like to use is if you think the past 5 to 10 years was a digital transformation, and companies that did not get on the digital transformation will get disrupted. The next years coming is the sustainability, circularity transformation. And companies that don't get on, organizations that don't get on this bandwagon will get disrupted either by regulation or by funding, or somebody's going to come along and eat your lunch because they're going to provide a service that your customers will buy that you're not providing. And so the way to convince, just to link back to stakeholders, the way to convince your stakeholders is to say, there's an opportunity here. There's a tremendous opportunity for growth, innovation, products, customers. But there's a risk that if we don't do anything, we're going to be the next Blockbuster or Kodak or one of these guys because we just didn't get on the bandwagon and didn't spot that the world is changing and adapt it. And that's the business conversation that needs to be had around sustainability.
Wow, that's a strong prediction, Samsurin. I think for any business owner who is in the chat and wants to learn more about the circular economy, I think it's a great argument you just gave, and I think all the panelists gave. Like, hey, you know, adapt. It's the same what happens in nature, right? Adapt or die. It happens in the economy as well. I see we're running out of time, so I would like to ask each of you panelists to maybe have a last 1 minute reflection for everybody, all the participants, to hear from you. And also maybe if you have a good idea or advice, if somebody wants to know more about the circular economy, where they can find more information. I would like to give the word first to Beatriz for last reflection for our participants.
Okay. I think just to complement what Samsurin was saying, I love a quote from Circular Economy in the Netherlands that they say, we need to help business to become future-proof. So yes, so circular economy is about strategies, about doing things in a different way. And for me, the point that I would like to add is that we need to work in an ecosystem. The transformation is not going to happen in just one company. It's an ecosystem change. So more and more we are seeing the role of orchestrators or transition brokers, as Jacqueline Kramer, the former Minister of Environment from the Netherlands, states, you know, the role of this facilitator that will connect all the different parts of the value chain, the large organizations, the small organization, and even bringing the academy and the public organizations together to create this suitable ecosystem to test and get things in practice. Because we don't have time to wait and to waste anymore. So we need to test and learn and do it again until we develop together these circular solutions. So we are working like that here in Brazil, and we are learning for all the other orchestrators and circular hubs in Europe, in Canada, in everywhere, to learn together and accelerate the transition. So thank you very much for this really amazing debate, and see you soon.
Thank you, Beatriz. Julie, one last reflection from you.
I think it's just going to be broad. I think it's important that we are, what we say at Plasticos, we're one big global society, one planet made up of many unique communities. As individuals, we hold the power to influence companies with our buying power. Companies loudly hear when the next generation, they are definitely transitioning because they know the next generation is more willing to protect and buy something that is more sustainable or is thought to be sustainable. So as individuals, we individually have that power to influence corporations. That same influence also helps with political persuasion, and so that we can have policies in place that support this. And as big of a problems as these may seem, these are very much solvable, and they're small solutions in all countries, no matter how small the community is. Those are all scalable, and we've seen this throughout history. These are things that we can innovate, we can change, and we're seeing this all the time. And it is about, the key to all of it is collaboration and partnership and learning from each other.
Thank you very much, Julie. Samsurin, a few last words of wisdom.
So we might have to come back in 5 years' time and see if I was correct in my prediction about the sustainability transformation. We'll put some money into it. No, I think, really enjoyed this conversation. I think Julie and Beatriz really summed up some of the key takeaways here. I would just say, again, tying back to the theme of this whole event about nature, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, we just look at the principles of nature. Nature has really, survived for billions of years before we came along, in terms of consuming resources and creating a prosperous ecology, embedding all these principles. Circularity is really just stealing these ideas and applying it to human society. And so by taking inspiration there, we can really make a big change. Collaboration is key. If you're a company, again, I'm in a business school, so if you have to work with the supply chain, you have to work with the regulators. Consumer power is massive, especially now when there's a systemic shift that's happening. So, and one thing I'll suggest to people, I love innovation. So I spend a lot of time talking to startups, spend a lot of time talking to young people. Go on and speak to young people, and you'll see how they really, Gen Zs, Gen Y, Gen Zs and millennials. And you see how they think so differently from my generation. I'm not going to tell you my age. And that makes you really, really inspired by what's happening. So change is happening. We just need to make it happen.
Thank you very much for your last words, Samsurin, and for every panelist today, to inspire everybody to be part of this circular economy, learn more from it, learn from other people, look around what's going on, try to be part of that. I think we're all looking for this change, and the change is happening now in any country, in any community, globally, locally, everywhere. So I just want to invite everybody to be part of this change. We haven't finished yet, so please don't leave yet. I'm saying this to the participants because we have a last part of this panel and a last invitation for every one of you. So again, thank you very much for being part of this circular economy panel.
All right, well, listen, thank you, Mark, thank you, Julie, thank you, Samsurin, thank you, Beatriz, and of course, thank all of you that actually joined the discussion today. Great questions from the attendees. We really appreciate that, and it was really an engaging conversation from everybody. So, with that, I just want to remind you, we will show the winners of the books in just a minute here. I do want to take just a second to remind folks that we do have a series of 5 more live upcoming panel discussions. Starting tomorrow is they're all at 11 a.m. Eastern time to be exact. Tomorrow's the value of eco-friendly entrepreneurship, how innovative companies are embracing sustainable products and practices to the benefit of our planet and to their bottom line. So John Davies from Avocado Green Brands will be moderating, and we have 3 founders on that panel tomorrow. Tommy Eaton from Bamboo Brush, makers of great bamboo toothbrushes, Nicholas Epstein, the co-founder of Foamy, and Susie Hewson, the founder of NatraCare. So make sure you tune in to that tomorrow. Again, absolutely free, as are the other upcoming panels. We have documentaries and environmental movements and how the documentaries are a powerful tool for movements. Climate change's impact on the wine industry. That's kind of an interesting one with 4 really amazing panelists on that. Youth perspectives, how are our young people really looking at the past, present, and future of environmentalism? And then finally, creativity as a voice for the planet, how art and artists can inspire action and change. So go to plasticoceans.org, you'll find links off to the Trees and Seas page where you'll find very obvious information about all these panels. And once again, they're free to join, free to register, and that's all due to our sponsors. We have to thank Montes Wines, our presenting sponsor, Avocado Mattress. We have to thank EcoWatch. There you go, EcoWatch. If you guys really want day-to-day news on the environment and what's happening, go to ecowatch.com. They have absolutely amazing coverage. And finally, One Tree Planted, who is one of the original folks on board to support the Trees and Seas concept. and they're responsible for providing us over 20,000 trees that we're planting down in Mark's neck of the woods, where he is right now on Chiloé Island, Chile. So with that, check out Trees and Seas. Please join the movement all week long. We got things going on in 30 locations around the world. You can volunteer at an event, you can still organize an event, or just act as an individual. Take your friends, family, watch a film, walk in your neighborhood, pick up some litter, and do whatever you can. But join us, please. And with that, let's go ahead and look at our book winners as soon as we can here. There we go. We got Sal Rizzo, Elanda Schaffner, Marcus Olson, Rebecca Shorak, and Victoria, I'm going to say Finkenstadt. I'm going to guess on that name. We will be in touch with all 5 of you. Again, it's Living Without Plastic. It's a beautiful hardcover edition book that Plastic Oceans put out earlier this year. It's got over 100 great ways that you can reduce your own personal plastic footprint. So with that, tomorrow, once again, same time, the next panel, we hope to see you all here. So thank you all for joining, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.